Hello, friends, and welcome back to Stories About Entitled People. We're kicking off today's video with a mall massage chair incident so bizarre it had the manager pleading, "Ma'am, please don't give birth in my store." Yeah, buckle up. But before we begin, best way to support our channel is to leave comments, like, and subscribe with the turned-on bell so you don't miss the new video every single day. Here we go. That time a customer nearly turned our massage chair into a delivery bed. A few years ago, I worked at one of those mall stores that sells ridiculously expensive massage chairs. You know the ones. If you ever pass by one, you've probably seen people kicked back in leather recliners, eyes closed like they're floating on clouds, while employees try to casually push five-figure price tags. They had no social media policy, but whatever, I don't work there anymore. So anyway, it was a pretty typical Saturday shift, just me and one of the managers rotating people in and out of the chairs. We had our usual rules posted: no kids, no food or drinks, shoes off, and every customer gets 10 minutes unless no one else is waiting. Pretty straightforward stuff. But you'd be surprised how many people ignore them. Now, while we're keeping the line moving, in walks this very, very pregnant woman, and I mean about to pop level pregnant. She waddled straight toward the biggest, most intense chair we had. This chair didn't just massage, it pounded, rolled, stretched, and twisted your entire body. Basically a chiropractic appointment in leather and chrome. Naturally, as soon as she appeared, everyone in line sort of just stepped aside. Nobody wants to be the jerk who tells a heavily pregnant woman she has to wait her turn. Fair enough. She plopped down into the chair like she'd been walking in the desert for 40 years and just found a spring. Before we could react, she grabbed the remote and started pressing buttons. My manager, let's call him Steve, noticed what she was doing and quickly headed over. With his best retail diplomacy smile, he said, "Hi there, ma'am. You're welcome to use the leg massager function for about 15 minutes, but I'm going to lock the rest of the chair settings just to be safe." She gave him a look. "Why can't I get the full massage?" Steve was already starting to look uneasy. Well, full-body massage chairs, especially this model, can sometimes induce labor in pregnant women. The intensity can trigger contractions or put pressure on certain points, so it's just our policy to avoid any risk. She just nodded slowly and said, "I'm ready." Steve blinked. "Excuse me?" "The due date's tomorrow," she said matter-of-factly. "Might as well give birth now and get it over with." There was a pause, a long, uncomfortable pause. You could practically hear the loading screen in Steve's brain as he tried to process what she'd just said. This man had been with the company for years, handled Black Friday chaos and pushy mall dads, but you could tell he had no playbook for this particular situation. Finally, in a half-laugh, half-plea voice, Steve said, "Ma'am, please don't give birth in my store." Now, to her credit, she wasn't actually going into labor or anything. She was mostly joking. Mostly. But she did look a little too comfortable in that chair, and the idea of explaining to corporate why there was placenta on a $12,000 massage unit probably crossed both our minds. The other customers who'd previously been curious or even entertained were now trying to pretend they weren't there. The lady chuckled, leaned back, and settled for the leg massage, looking smug as hell while Steve quietly retreated back behind the display table. After her 15 minutes, she got up like nothing happened, thanked us, and waddled off, presumably not in active labor. But for the rest of the day, we kept glancing at the entrance, half expecting her to show up again with a stroller and a birth certificate asking if the chair counted as a delivery room. Wrong email? Fine. I'll mess with you until you figure it out. Last year, I started receiving emails from a building owner affectionately known as Jezza, by me anyway, and property manager for some building in the UK. I'm in Australia. It soon became apparent that they were under the impression that I was a business partner of Jezza. I tried to make it clear they had the wrong email, but they just laughed it off for ages. I wasn't really a fan of the approach that Jezza took to hiring and paying cleaning staff, particularly when one of the staff had some family emergency that interfered with her work, and Jezza just called her a time waster. So I decided to mess with them until they got the point. The property manager was CC'd on all of these emails. When the property manager said the cleaner would work for £15 per clean, I said no, we should pay $20 instead. When Jezza said no, I responded with the following. I just thought after the conversation that me and Jezza Wobbles had over a couple of tinnies last weekend that we agreed we no longer wanted to support a capitalist economy that entrenches the working poor. Let's actually start paying people living wages so they can enjoy the pleasantries of life instead of wondering if they can make rent. That's what you said, wasn't it, Jezzy Poos? I guess you weren't really serious about overthrowing the capitalist state. When Jezza ordered a sign for the bin store, I responded with this. Can we also arrange a sign for the back of the door at the main entrance encouraging people to have a really lovely day? Maybe another one in the bin store telling them to follow their dreams. And can we install signs over the phone socket in each flat asking them when they called their mom last? What do you reckon? Also, have you read The Subtle Art of Not Giving a F? Image text. I'm learning how to walk away from people in situations that threaten my belief systems and ego. And finally, when Jezza called the cleaner a time waster for having the audacity to have a family, I responded with this. Time wasters are just the worst, which is why we've decided to let you go, Jezza. You've been filling our inboxes with drivel for months, and we're sick of it. Please clear out your desk by the end of the day. There were a couple more emails back and forth where Jezza actually said that if I didn't want to be included in emails, then there were better ways of saying it. I haven't heard from him since, but I don't know if that's because he worked out I was not the person he thought I was, or because he thought his business partner no longer wanted to be CC'd. And our next story. Imagine getting fired for theft, then acting shocked you're not welcome back. This story was told to me while I was working for a mid-range fashion retailer. At the time, one of our stores was going through a full refit, new layout, fresh fixtures, the works. The company was bringing in visual merchandisers, VMs, to handle the redesign, and they also asked nearby staff to come help out. I was part-time, could use the extra hours, and I'd been hoping to move into merchandising someday, so I volunteered. While we were working the late shift on their refit one evening, a couple of their regular VMs started swapping stories from past projects. You could tell they'd seen it all. But one story in particular stuck with me. A few weeks earlier, they'd been working on a new store setup, the kind where everything's being installed from scratch and the new staff are simultaneously being trained. Everything was chaotic. Long days and nights, people from different stores thrown together. During one of those long shifts, one of the new hires went to her locker and found it hanging open with 20 pounds missing from her bag. She reported it to the manager right away, and thankfully the security cameras were already installed and active. It didn't take long to find the footage, and sure enough, it showed another new employee clearly going into someone else's locker and taking the money. Management pulled the girl into the office and asked her directly if she'd taken the 20 pounds. No excuses, no lies, she admitted it right there. Said she needed it and would pay it back after she got her first paycheck. She said it also matter-of-factly, like it was just a temporary borrowing situation. The manager told her flat out that it was completely unacceptable. Regardless of her reasoning, stealing was a serious offense and she'd be escorted out of the building. The girl just said, "All right," and followed the manager out the door. No drama. You'd think that would be the end of it. But the next morning, bright and early, she showed up at the side entrance, waiting to be let in like nothing had happened. The passcode for the door had been changed, as is standard when someone's terminated, and she couldn't get in. She just stood there looking confused until someone called the manager to come deal with it. When the manager arrived, she had to explain, again, that stealing from coworkers was a fireable offense. This wasn't just a slap on the wrist or a one-day timeout. The girl was genuinely surprised. She seemed to think that getting sent home the day before was the extent of her punishment, and that because she said she'd pay the money back, it should have been forgiven. Apparently, in her mind, a verbal IOU was all it took to undo theft. The VMs were still laughing about it when they told the story, and honestly, I couldn't believe someone could be that casual about stealing from a colleague, especially on the first week of a new job. That's got to be one of the shortest employment stints I've ever heard of. It definitely stuck with me, both as a lesson in what not to do and as a weird little reminder that some people just don't grasp how consequences work. And our last story. My neighbors built a shed on my land. Last spring, I noticed my neighbors had started pouring concrete right up against our shared property line. They'd mentioned something about building a storage shed for their tools and patio furniture. I didn't think much of it until I walked to my yard and saw the concrete pad extended a solid 5 feet onto my land. I walked up to their door and knocked. The husband answered. "Hey," I said as politely as possible, "just a heads up, your shed foundation's partially on my property." He crossed his arms and said flatly, "No, it's not. We measured." "Right. Well, I think there's been a mistake." "We followed the old fence line," his wife chimed in from behind him. "You're probably confused." I wasn't confused. The old fence line was crooked, and anyone with eyes could see the new concrete didn't line up with the plat map, but rather than argue, I thanked them and walked away. The next day, I called a licensed surveyor and had them mark the true boundaries. I paid out of pocket just under $900, but worth every cent. Turns out, not only had they poured their foundation on my land, the entire back wall of the shed they were building was 5 feet over the line. When I showed them the survey results, complete with flagged markers and legal documentation, they weren't apologetic, they were irritated. "It's just a few feet," the husband snapped. "We already built the damn thing." "You didn't ask before you poured concrete," I replied. "You didn't even give me a heads up." "It's your word against ours," he said, motioning toward the old fence line. "And that thing's been there for decades." I held up the survey packet. "It's not just my word." His wife rolled her eyes. "Well, just move the property line then. It's not like you're using it." I don't know what annoyed me more, the arrogance or the assumption that I'd cave because it was easier. Instead of demanding they tear the shed down, I did something else. My state has strong adverse possession laws. If you use land openly and notoriously for a number of years, in our case 10, you can claim ownership. But it works both ways. That shed was now an improvement on my land. I consulted a real estate attorney and filed a claim that the structure was mine by virtue of being permanently affixed to my property. It took a couple of months to go through court, but it was airtight. The judge reviewed the survey, heard both sides, and issued a ruling. The shed, though built by them, was legally my property. They looked like they'd been slapped. The husband's face turned beet red. The wife muttered something about suing me back, but their lawyer was already packing up and shaking his head. After they left, I emailed them an offer. "You're welcome to continue using my shed for $150 a month." They refused naturally, called me greedy, said I was taking advantage of a harmless mistake, but the reality of their situation set in quickly. To move the structure, they'd have to pay a contractor thousands to demo and rebuild, and they'd need permits and inspections all over again. By the following month, I got a Venmo notification, $150 from the wife. The memo read, "For the damn shed." I accepted it with a smile. But I wasn't finished. Since the shed was now mine, I decided to repaint it. I went down to the hardware store and bought the brightest, most retina-burning shade of neon pink I could find. No HOA rules on color, and it definitely didn't violate any zoning. I spent an entire weekend slapping 2 coats of it onto the shed's exterior. It glowed like a highlighter in the sun. That Monday, I got a knock on my door. The wife looked like she'd chewed lemon rind. "You painted our shed." "No," I said, "I painted my shed." She stood there blinking, then pulled out her phone to show me a picture. "You could have at least picked something neutral. This is an eyesore." "You're welcome to repaint it," I said, deadpan. "It'll cost you $500. She stomped off without another word. A few days later, another Venmo payment arrived, $150, same memo. They still rented from me. They tried to build another shed, smaller this time, entirely on their side of the fence, but apparently ran into permit issues. So for now, the neon pink shed sits there, technically mine, practically theirs, and a monthly reminder that not everyone will roll over when you try to bully your way into free land. Charging them $150 a month to use their own shed is genius. It's not enough to bankrupt them, but just enough to salt the wound every 30 days. The fact they paid instead of demolishing it proves how much they'd already sunk into the project and how badly they'd screwed themselves. Hey guys, thank you all for watching the video. I'll see you in the next one.